Hello, everyone. Hello. As you all come in, welcome. We'll get started in a few seconds. We still have lots of people coming in. If you've attended one of our webinars before, you know what I'm going to say, but if you could drop in your where you're working at this summer and even, where you're zooming in from in the chat, we really appreciate it. We love to see all of the different interns and where they're interning at and from where. So go ahead and put your information in the chat there. Would also like to point out that we have a few more outdoor MCC events coming up next week. As you can see here, we're going to the Nonantum. This is a resort in Kennebunkport. You can kayak on the ocean and enjoy some time out there. And next Saturday, our only weekend event, we're going to be doing a kind of a half day trip up in the New Meadows, and you're going to be able to get a free chartered boat ride, check out some oyster farms, get a free oysters, and do this really cool event with us next Saturday. So just want to point out those two events. And before I move it over to our panel, I'd just like to thank our sponsors as well. IDEX, Tyler Technologies, and Maine Health, who allow us to do this webinar series. This is our fourth one. So with all that said, and I think most people have settled in, I'm going to hand it over to our panelists. I just want them to briefly, say their name and their where they're working at. And then we'll kind of kick it off more after that. And so I'll have Michaela kick it off first.
Great. Thanks so much, John. Thanks for inviting me to be here. My name is Michaela Schweitzer Bloom. Most people call me Mika, so I hope you all will feel free to do so as well. I am the executive director of the Maine Center for Public Interest Reporting, which is a nonprofit news organization. We publish the digital publication, The Maine Monitor, which focuses on investigative and explanatory journalism on accountability and solutions issues in Maine.
Have Colleen go next.
Great, thank you. And I'm really pleased to be here and thank you for the invitation. My name is Colleen Ippolito, and I am the Senior Vice President of Human Resources and Office Administration for CEI, or Coastal Enterprises. We are headquartered in Brunswick, Maine. And CEI, we belong to an industry known as Community Development Financial Institutions, which I'll elaborate a little bit more on when we get to later in the program. Our mission as a CDFI is to build a just, vibrant, and climate resilient future for people and communities in Maine and other rural regions throughout the state as well as throughout the country. And we do this by integrating finance, business expertise, and policy solutions with the ultimate goal of creating a more equitable economy. So that is a mouthful, but again, I'm really pleased to be here, and I'm sure I'll have the opportunity to elaborate on some of that a little later on. So thank you.
Thank you, Colleen. And I'll throw it over to Aislinn.
Hi, I am Aislinn Keys. I am the marine educator at Bigelow Laboratory for Ocean Sciences. We are a research institution nestled in East Boothbay, Maine. And a lot of our research here focuses on the foundations of global ocean health. So you can think like plankton, bacteria, and viruses, but our research is really expansive, and we're not just focused on basic science, but there's a lot of applied science happening here and entrepreneurship and technology transfer. We started as a scrappy little startup 50 years ago, actually, and we've grown into a world-renowned ocean science hub. So really awesome. If you haven't heard of us, you should check us out.
And lastly, Aisha.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. I'm Isha Khan, pronouns she, her. I identify as a Kashmiri American and serve at Maine Health as a program manager with a focus on social drivers of health. And for my work, Maine Health is really a nexus between healthcare and public health. We work with both our patients and our community, serving over 1.1 million patients, individuals in the state of Maine and New Hampshire. And our vision is working together so our communities are the healthiest in America, and really looking forward to this conversation today.
Thank you, everyone. So we really wanted to try and highlight the different types of industries. You can kind of note if you were, falling back home, that all of these different nonprofits and these leaders of these nonprofits kind of represent various industries. I kind of wanted you to begin with a little bit more of your story. Speaking for myself, I work at nonprofit Educate Maine. Many of you are familiar with Maine Career Catalyst. That's a program within the larger nonprofit of Educate Maine. We're all about trying to work towards improving high quality educators and education in Maine. That was not my intended career path. I went to become a classroom teacher. I was a classroom teacher, and I found myself in a nonprofit. So starting with Mika and kind of working our way as we did, just tell us a little bit about how you found yourself in a nonprofit. Was that your intended career path? And how did that go with what you thought of yourself, with many of our audience members being now in college, they're student interns. So kind of like putting yourself in their shoes. How did you find yourself where you are now?
Sure. So I'll go. Let's see, I always knew that I wanted a job in, I would say, public service. So not necessarily, didn't think of it as necessarily nonprofit, but I always knew that I wanted a career that was going to be in public service. And I looked at a lot of different things. I thought about journalism, worked as a journalist while I was in college, and looked at government service as well as looking at nonprofits. I studied international relations, so I was looking at nonprofits like Save the Children and CARE and Oxfam and things like that. So I did actually look at nonprofits when I started out, but mostly my focus was doing something where I felt like I was making a difference. And for me, that was all about public service. And where I ended up actually was going into government service. I was a foreign service officer, which is another way of saying a US diplomat, for 26 years. So I started doing that when I was 24, and I retired from that at 50. I put it in quotes because who really retires at 50? So I did that for 26 years. My career was as a US diplomat. Traveling all over the world and representing the US government and engaging with public audiences around the world. When I looked at when we came back to Maine and made our home and wanted to, really invest in our home in Maine, I looked again at, well, how can I continue in public service? And I looked at a lot of different things, and this opportunity with the Maine Monitor came up. And for me, it was the perfect blend of all the work that I had been doing over 26 years, sort of advocating for the principles of democracy, chief among them of free press, and my sense of public service, and really wanting to have that public service be focused on my home in Maine. And so I jumped at the opportunity and was fortunate enough to get it. So I've been doing this only actually for 2 years, but that I found myself in a nonprofit after my 26-year career as a public servant it doesn't surprise me. I wasn't looking for something, I wasn't focused, my professional life has always been focused on doing work that I felt was meaningful. So that was maybe a long answer, but that's my path. Little unusual.
But very interesting. I can't remember the order now. Was it Colleen next?
Yeah, I think so. Thanks. What an interesting career path, Mika. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I also had a fairly circuitous career path. So unlike Mika, who knew it sounded like she knew what she wanted to. I had no idea what I wanted to do. I attended Bates College in Lewiston, Maine. I was a biology major, and for a hot minute was really interested in oceanography and thought maybe that was going to be, yeah, go Bates. That thought that was going to be a career path for me. And then after doing my senior thesis, I loved doing the research part. It was the data analysis and that piece of that, at least at that time in my life, I didn't connect with really well. So I did also go into teaching, similar to John, because again, I was a little uncertain as to what I wanted to do. So I graduated from Bates and actually then spent a year commuting from Western Maine, Bethel, because my now husband is from that general area of Maine. And so I went to UMaine Farmington for a year, obtaining my secondary education certification, and was very fortunate to get hired into the Berlin, New Hampshire school district. So I taught high school science for 4 years, and then decided that that was not a long-term path for me. I did a little stint in culinary school at Southern Maine Community College because I love cooking and baking. But also, again, having some practical experience working in a high-end restaurant in Portland, I knew that was not the life for me either. So I was at this kind of pivotal crossroads in my late 20s, thinking about like, what do I want to do? And again, we were living in Western Maine and Sunday River Ski Resort, which some of you may be familiar with. I interviewed to be in a kitchen, working in a kitchen, or as a temporary HR, kind of like administrator type of role. And I chose the HR position, and the individual who I was replacing while she was out on parental leave decided not to return to that role. And that was over 20 years ago. So I haven't been at Sunday River for 20 years, but that was the start of my HR career at Sunday River Ski Resort. Super fascinating, like tourist, seasonal industry. I learned a ton. And from there, I have worked my way into managerial roles, taking on more responsibility. Um, and then I've worked at a large commercial law firm in Portland. I have worked in traditional banking at a bank that's headquartered, well, formerly was headquartered in Lewiston. Um, and I've also worked in a very large news gathering organization as the HR director. And then, yeah, and then made this kind of got to the point in my life and career where I was thinking, well, I have this skill set. I've been doing this a long time. I wasn't particularly happy with the work, and this opportunity at CEI presented itself. And I didn't know anything about CDFIs. I knew HR, I know HR, but I really didn't know anything about CDFIs. But I really appreciated the mission and the impact in community. I knew that was very important to me at that stage of my life and career. And so I interviewed for it. And at the time, they didn't have an HR director. And so I was very fortunate in that I came into the organization at a time where I was able to build out a lot of the operations, the people operations here, and then progress into more strategic elements of human resources. So again, a very circuitous route, but and I learned a lot along the way. So thanks.
A lot of different career paths, and I hope that people at home are following this common theme. Aislinn?
Yeah, no, it's really exciting and interesting to hear both of your paths, and being kind of on the earlier end of this, just knowing, I think it resonates, that's like, you don't have to know what you want to do for the rest of your life, even though it feels like you do. So I similarly didn't really have a goal of working with nonprofits. I knew that I really liked science. I went to the University of Minnesota for my undergraduate degree, and I did a self-designed degree that combined marine biology, sustainability, and Spanish. And throughout undergrad, I did a lot of research, and mainly in freshwater lakes and things like that, and took the opportunities I could to get to the ocean. But I'm originally from the Midwest, so I did what I could with where I was at. And when I graduated, I found it was really challenging to get a job in fisheries because my undergrad degree title was kind of this interdisciplinary degree that wasn't really recognized at the time. And I ended up working in education and outreach through Conservation Corps, which is kind of under the umbrella of AmeriCorps. And I worked with a monarch butterfly conservation organization, nonprofit, and it was very small. When I was there were 7 of us, and I really appreciated how personable it felt, and I was engaged, and everyone just cared so deeply about the mission of the organization, which sounds like it kind of resonates with what Colleen and Mika, did you say? Sorry. Yeah, had mentioned. And after that, that was a year-long program. Well, I guess while I was there, I was doing education and outreach, and really enjoyed interacting with people in a way that I hadn't been doing research. But I went back to school. I got my PhD in ecology and evolutionary biology at the University of Colorado Boulder. And that was largely for my college self. You know, I realized a year into it that I didn't want to be doing science full-time as my career, but that I really enjoyed it. And so through that experience, I kind of realized that I had this deep interest in bringing science outside of the ivory tower and thinking about equity and accessibility of science, and took opportunities to kind of develop those skills in just an equitable teaching, and really delved into the pedagogy aspect of that. And I actually finished graduate school last spring and found myself on the coast of Maine in Booth Bay Harbor as a lighthouse caretaker with my partner, which I was able to do because I interned with the Department of Marine Resources the previous fall. And so I got to kind of experience the government work with that, and then had that really cool opportunity. And I didn't have a strong sense of what I would do for my career. I just knew I wanted to be doing something related to the ocean, and ideally science, education, outreach, communications area. And right as I was finishing up the seasonal summer position, Bigelow Laboratory was hiring a new marine educator position that hadn't existed previously. And so I didn't have to go far after that seasonal position. I'm still in Booth Bay Harbor, and it's been, yeah, really exciting to be in a nonprofit that's been growing pretty rapidly.
We'll have to talk more about that lighthouse experience. That was pretty cool.
I agree. This is such a fun group. So this is a very interesting question. Intended career path as a young person, just tapping into my career. I think I would resonate a lot like those who are tuning in. I do put a lot of intentionality around the work I do, but I would say the path is primarily for me has been carved out by my community. So those are folks, whether they are family members or mentors or friends. So I think I've personally truly benefited from the lived experiences and just the knowledge and wisdom of those in my community. So as I mentioned, I come from a Kashmiri background, and Kashmir is a disputed territory. It's a stateless, very similar to Rohingya or Palestine or other stateless communities. And service and mission driven are two things that are very much embedded in my community and in my family in particular. So I knew from a very early age that a lot of folks before us have sacrificed a lot for us to be where we are. So that service driven, mission driven grounding is always there. And in my early education career, I focused on psychology, international relations, and global health. And for me, they were all kind of connected, psychology with global health with international relations. And early on, some of my mentors had worked in United Nations or had been ambassadors in different countries and were able to really help guide me in seeing that there is not a career or a position that I'm like, yes, that's what I want to be or go for, but being able to lean on various different careers and other people's knowledge and wisdom can really, in 10 years from now, the jobs that don't exist will be able to fit into those perfectly because we get to drive and create and carve those positions. So my first real kind of introduction to nonprofit was working with United Nations, and in particular, I work with United Nations Higher Commission for Refugees, and a lot of the work in that body of organization had to do with working with those who were part of like forced migration or even internally displaced, and just understanding what the term refugee meant in the 21st century, I think exposed me to a lot of different pathways that I could explore as a young person, all leading from the lens of trauma-informed care. And a lot of the work that I did was traveling to refugee camps, doing a lot of just like reporting, collecting data, storytelling. And I, being in those positions, was the least informed and, working with experts in their field. So I think I got a free pass to just be an observant, to be able to observe and just absorb a lot of what I was seeing and build a lot of relationships to where those I still have today with the families that I lived with in those areas, and just being able to see how a lot of how do you really do the work that is thinking globally and acting locally. So when I did have the opportunity to, about 5 years ago, to move to Maine, because my partner's from Maine, and we're like, maybe this is where we kind of explore our careers for the next couple of years. I had the fortune of working and applying for a position at Maine Health that focused on childcare. And during the same period, and as current state, we work with a lot of refugee asylum seekers, though that wasn't my primarily predominant community that I was working on. A lot of my work did touch that. And the other big part of the work that I was doing touch on substance misuse. And those are issues, whether it's substance misuse that leads into unhousing and other things, are all that I feel that as a young professional working with various different refugee camps or things that we were seeing. And oftentimes these disparities are very predominant, and visually you are able to see in a war-torn country or refugee camps, but those very much exist here in the United States behind concrete walls as well. So I think that just has inspired me to continue to explore what public health looks like and what trauma-informed care looks like, and what does working for and empowering communities looks like, to where we're not just surviving our day-to-day, but really thriving, because there is built-in resiliency. We have so many people who are able to overcome so many things. So what would that look like for me? And being able to kind of do local work that has global impact, even in the state of Maine. I think it's such a honor to be in these places, to be able to learn and serve our communities through healthcare. And I think that in itself, hopefully, will have other pathways for me as I continue to explore. But yeah, I think I've personally not worked for I've only worked for a nonprofit, so that's my limited experience. And I think in terms of intended pathway, those just continue to show up as needs, and our priorities continue to evolve. But service and public service and mission driven are the two things that I look forward to as I explore different pathways.
Well, that's so, I mean, so honored to be in this Zoom room with all four of you. And thank you all for sharing that. I wanted to zero in on what all of you touched upon was mission driven. And for our, audience at home to kind of think about, if you were considering a career in the nonprofits, most of them, all of them usually have a mission. And I wanted to throw it over to Colleen first and then Mika second about how, that mission attracted you to apply that, and then also how that mission is kind of lived through your work right now. So like how did you consider the role in the organization in regards to their mission, and why would you go there?
Sure. So again, when I first learned about CEI, it was the first nonprofit organization that had been on my radar. I had always worked in for-profit. But again, the idea of purposeful work and impact and community intersecting with sophisticated business financing was super intriguing to me, because I do love business as well. And they don't have to be mutually exclusive, at least in our sector. So I thought that was so fascinating. And so again, and I referenced this earlier, the opportunity to come into an organization, and just for a little bit of context, we're our nonprofit entity. We have about 62 employees, but we also have 3 wholly owned for-profit subsidiaries that we also support. So our total headcount is about 75. It was it was intriguing. The work itself was intriguing. It was exciting, but that mission and wow, I'm taking the skill set, but I'm really having a more broad impact. And that's not to diminish the other experiences I had or other organizations. That's great. But knowing that we were having an impact on our community, that just really resonated. It was really important to me. Our roots are in the civil rights movement and social justice issues, and this idea of creating an equitable economy and working with entrepreneurs who also are trying to fulfill their dreams, but particularly in low-income communities in Maine, and working with entrepreneurs of color and women entrepreneurs and rural economies. Again, all this, it was just kind of wow, it was very eye-opening. I didn't even know this was a thing. So that just really resonated with me, personally, deeply. And the timing was right. The timing was right to kind of exit that for-profit work I'd done, and I'd learned a ton, but to enter into a really unique type of environment. And the one thing that I just find, and I think everyone has kind of touched upon this, is that the people we have at CEI, at least, and that mission is also really close to their heart. And it's, there are elements of it that maybe some resonate more with some folks than others, but truly having that impact in communities in Maine and beyond, it really is what centers all of us, including our for-profit entities. So I hope I answered the question, John. I feel like I'm sort of like rambling there, but
No, it's great.
I hope I answered the question. Okay.
Oh, more than okay.
Okay.
I think you wanted me to go next, John. Okay. So I think, you know, as all of you who are interning this summer are finding, work can be hard. Work, you know, it's work. It's work for a reason. We call it work, and because it is work. And so I've always been really motivated by mission, as a way to feel the reward of the hard work that I'm doing. I really, you know, if I feel that there's a purpose to the work I'm doing, it's not hard. I'm working hard, but it's not hard. And so that's always been a very strong motivator for me. And with the Maine Monitor, it brought together so many of my passions. I mean, our whole purpose is our news is investigative, it's in depth. Our mission is to bring information and news that people can't easily get on their own, and that the legacy media in Maine is not covering. Where our intent is to empower people with information. That's our purpose. And like Colleen, we feel really strongly that we're making a difference in our community. This is something that we feel really is very important for people in Maine to be engaged and active citizens, and to hold institutions accountable to the people of Maine. That's really what journalism is all about. And investigative journalism in particular really focuses on that. So for me, you know, I have lived in countries where they did not have a free press, and I've seen what the lack of a free press can do to a society. And so this is a real passion for me, is to uphold and defend an independent free press, and to make sure that all of us in Maine have access to information that does empower us to be able to be participants in our community. And it's not just me that feels that way in our organization. Everyone that works there is sort of like what Colleen was saying. Everybody that works there is very mission driven. Everybody believes that the work that we're doing is important, and that our role in our community is important. I would say that that's a real lovely unifier at mission-driven organizations, because people are there because they really believe in it. They're not there just because they want the paycheck. They're there because they're passionate about the work. And I do think that one of the other principles I've always upheld about career choices is go to the places where there's interesting people. Because when you work with interesting people, it's always going to be an interesting experience, and they're going to challenge you in new ways. And I think that in mission-driven organizations, there's a real unity of spirit that makes for a very exciting and dynamic workplace.
So, you know, to consider the mission and what you really want to do, as you go about your internship, I'm speaking to the audience now, you know, as you develop your personal brand, something that we talked about in a few webinars ago, and you gain more experience, you can kind of, you know, look at different organizations, what they do, and look at what you want to do and see if there's a common, you know, commonality there. I want to kind of touch upon one of our questions from the Q&A, which is about, you know, what advice would you give to new interns? Thank you for those who are sending in their questions. But I want to give it over to Aislinn first, specifically about pursuing a career in research and marine education. Maine has a lot of nonprofits, as you can see, and we have a lot of nonprofits specifically in research. So could you kind of speak at what advice would you give if someone was interested in that kind of career path?
Yeah, no, did I freeze? Okay, I totally agree that Maine, you know, maybe isn't the first. Research and science is maybe not the first thing that comes to your mind when you think about Maine. It might be more kind of natural resources and fisheries and things like that. But there's a lot of investment happening at the state level in science and the biotech industry here in the state. And Maine has we're home to a number of really well-known research institutions, not just in the state, but in the region, in the country. And there's been a lot of investment in not only developing those institutions, but also the workforce that's going to power those places. And there's lots of training opportunities and jobs that are opening up. For example, at Bigelow, we have, while we're primarily a research institution, we have a number of professional development, training opportunities, and internships available for students and recent graduates. And so I think that if you are interested in the sciences and thinking of leaving the state, before you do that, just really take some time to delve into what you have here, because it's an amazing place. I'm very happy to be here. And I think it's only going to grow more. Similarly with the education space, there's so many coastal education nonprofits that are looking for people to kind of carry their mission forward. And so, yeah, I would say that if you like STEM and you're interested in it, to really explore the opportunities that are available to you.
I kind of want to kick it out to the group as well, like just advice for interns who are considering nonprofits as a career path. Yeah.
I'll offer something, which is nonprofits we're nonprofits, so we need to be able to make our case. We need to be able to communicate what we're doing and seek funding. And that's it comes in the form of grant applications. It comes in the form of individual appeals, donation appeals. Communication is such an important part of what nonprofits do. And so if you have really strong writing skills, communication skills, those are invaluable. So you don't have to have, I know there are some programs in nonprofit management and those are great, but if you're just a really good communicator and sort of a strategic thinker, and you can articulate, translate the work that Ashlyn's doing in the sciences into, impact and mission to get grants and things like that, communication. So strong writing, strong speaking skills, those are invaluable skills for nonprofits.
Yeah, Colleen.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to raise my virtual hand there. Yeah, I agree, and I'll speak for CEI specifically. We're actually hosting 4 summer interns this summer, but yeah, definitely I would say for interns, do your homework first. If you have a specific field that you're interested in, that's great. Like if it's STEM, like definitely do your research. For our organization, so fundamentally, we are a lender and investor, and we're deploying capital in our communities. So if you're interested in finance, a career in finance, definitely there are 1,000 CDFIs across the country. We're not unique. We're unique, but there are other CDFIs across the country. Doing your homework, and in our case, again, we have a lending team, we have lending operations, we also have our infrastructure teams, HR, marketing, IT, and so that group, that we have those types of roles. We also have, and what does make us unique as compared to some other CFIs, is we also have business advising teams. So if you're like entrepreneurial, or that's an area that you're really curious about, our business advising teams are and sector experts in fisheries and aquaculture, childcare, workforce development, and then kind of other sectors in the state, fisheries and aquaculture. So any of those areas that you may be interested in, again, not all CDFIs have like the business advising element to it, but many of them do, or they have partner organizations. So doing your homework and really thinking about, where do my interests lies? And to Mika's point, you don't have to necessarily be an English major to work at a nonprofit in, that storytelling. But if you like the storytelling, or you're really good with like visual media, like there could be a place for you within the nonprofit. Where we always need that, like the storytelling is really an important element to our marketing and getting our names out there, and so people are familiar with us. So that would be one. I said many things in that, but those are some ideas that come to mind.
Mhm. I want to turn over to Aisha now. There are so many different types of nonprofits in Maine. I think that we have a very vibrant nonprofit ecosystem in Maine. But they not all have to be small. Like sometimes when we think of nonprofits, we think of like the struggling nonprofit that like doesn't pay very well, and it's just hard to make ends meet. But Aisha, being at Maine Health, which is the largest employer, or largest private employer, I should say, in Maine, how do you kind of, how is it different working at a larger nonprofit? And I also think that you were a little modest in your introduction, because you do a lot more than just your work at Maine Health, and you've connected with a lot of different organizations. So from your experience, how's it different working at a larger nonprofit versus a smaller nonprofit?
Yeah, this is a great question. So having, as John, you mentioned that Maine Health is one of the largest, and if you even compare it to the state of Maine, with the exception of looking at maybe the teachers, it is the largest employer. So what that to me is like, when you really step into it, it's an ecosystem of its own. And when we start to examine, it's very much what Colleen and others mentioned, that ecosystem holds space for a lot of different professions, a lot of different ideas, a lot of different collaboration. And those collaboration really for Maine Health extend beyond the four walls of Maine Health, and go into the community in relationship to its mission of working together for communities are the healthiest in America. In the same sphere, I think what is really unique in terms of Maine Health and its work is that we are able to address both rural needs and also be able to see our emerging needs that are coming up in our community as Maine, as a state, continues to grow. So for me, when I see this large body of work that the Maine Health is doing, it's really in a place situated really well to understand what is the intersectionality between rural disparities and racial inequity, and being able to partner with a lot of other organizations that touch both rural areas as well as emerging nonprofits, and work around racial equity that we're seeing in a lot of the organizations that are represented here, but also beyond that. And I think for, again, the other big part is large is a relative term. So having come from United Nations Higher Commission of Refugees, which is huge, maybe not large, it is all relevant. But in the state of Maine, I think one of the really interesting thing is we do have a lot of smaller organizations that are addressing the immediate needs. And I think that comparison in relationship to the state of Maine is also very interesting. I've been able to volunteer and be part of various different smaller nonprofit organizations, whether it is our Main Street business here in this Biddeford where I reside, working on the board of the Heart of Biddeford, which does a lot of work within the ecosystem of a small city, but has a trickle impact effect on the rest of the, York County as a entire county, but also working with a lot of nonprofits that focus on health and wellness of immigrant organizations. So I think there are two things. One is what I see kind of the comparison between is smaller nonprofit. They really have lofty goals. So does larger nonprofit, and it's the people who work that have to carry those out. So whether you're at a small or large organization, you really are the driving force. So for those who are interning, just know that you all have a voice, just like each of us have a voice, and being able to channel that, that comes through a lot of collaboration. In large organization, I think we have a natural collaboration that happens within, because you're working with IT, you're working with legal team, you're working with public health, healthcare, service lines. So there is, again, that big, large ecosystem. And in smaller organization, you're doing the same. And it's a lot of outreach that happens outside of also your organization. So I think hopefully that kind of answers your question. And like working, it's both prioritizes, emerging issues. And when you have your footing in a nonprofit, I think it's really important. One of the things that I carry with me is to be agile, because that emerging need changes every single day. And that can be a demotivator at times when you see a hot topic change or a priority change from one community or one prioritization to another. I saw that more often even in United Nations Association, where entire communities, well, one day it's the Rohingyas, the other day it's the Syrians, and your funding and efforts and operation budget all shift to those other communities. So it's really, as a young people, as a young professional, it's like having your footing in nonprofit and being agile and really carving a path for yourself where you feel what is the mission and how we're serving those who are here, whether it's a large, small, or organization that you're part of.
Love that. Yeah, I think being agile is a great mindset and skill to develop. And also, to kind of go on previous questions, mission driven, open, interdisciplinary, good communicator, storyteller. All these are all qualities that may, be successful in any industry, but specifically nonprofits. My next question is actually one that one of our is in the Q&A as well, but just to kind of touch upon the nervousness that some people might feel about working in nonprofits. I know for myself, this is my first nonprofit that I've worked at, and I also shared that. From unstable job security, like when a grant finishes up, or to workload, or just lack of advancement or compensation. These are, I think, sometimes not true, but also sometimes true. So could you speak to that? I'm just going to kind of put it up to the group here, but what would you say to someone who is nervous about entering into this field?
I'm going to debunk some of what you just said a little bit. And I've been at CEI for 8 years, and I, up until recently, when I hired a talent diversity manager, I handled all of our recruiting. So I think there is a little bit of a misconception about the compensation piece around nonprofits. And I can't speak for all nonprofits, but I can say specifically for CEI, again, we're a financial services organization. We are competing for the same talent pool as our local community banks and key banks and larger financial institutions. For at least like our core lending team, but also other positions, we're competing for talent. We're all competing for talent. Maine is not a huge state, like from a population density perspective. But at least in our case, I do market research. I work with an HR consulting firm, and we do compensation studies every 2 years, and I do have them benchmark against for-profit entities as well, because I want to see like where are we, and if someone's desire is to be making a 6-figure salary 2 to 3 years out of college, then I don't care if it's nonprofit or for profit, unless you're going to work on Wall Street or like a large urban area. I just want to ground people in reality, and it's likely not going to be the case right out of school. The compensation, we are competitive with the main market. We look at the geography. can we compete with Boston and New York and like some urban areas? No, but I'm very transparent with people about that. And I've recruited people from out of state. In the pandemic, we've had more and more people from who are coming from larger urban areas. So in our instance, I think being transparent about our compensation. I'm very upfront with our candidates about, we post our salary ranges on our job postings, and I think we're very clear about that. There have been instances where people take pay cuts, but again, the trade-off is that mission orientation. We provide a very robust benefits package. We are very flexible with our time off. We work in a hybrid. So there are ways to offset like that core, like just base salary piece. In terms of workload, I think Aisha's point is very on point, and that is, you do, depending on the size of the organization, there are times where you do need to be a little bit more nimble, perhaps, than a much larger, like for-profit entity, or if you have a very specialized role, for example. But but we're very like team collaborative oriented organization. So you have to know that other people have your back too. As far as the stability of the role, those are areas where, again, I've been very upfront with candidates. I mean, it is, if it is a position that has like 2-year funding attached to it, we're very transparent about that. And we let people know. But my experience, I mean, we have a pretty significant operating budget at CEI, and we've diversified how we receive our funding. So, I mean, I can count on one hand the number of positions we've actually had to eliminate, which is a terrible word, I know, but positions that no longer had funding attached to them over the last 47 years of CEI's existence. So the positions we have are very critical, and we do think strategically about our different staffing needs. At the same time, we do everything we can to preserve the positions that we have. But honestly, like any organization, when you look at the business and the operational needs of the business, there are times where a business may need to pivot and do restructuring within their organization, and that can impact a variety of roles within the organization. And I don't think that's just unique to a nonprofit.
I'm just going to say everything Colleen said. Like I agree 100% with everything she said, and the same principles that she's working on in terms of trying to benchmark against private sector, trying to make jobs attractive, trying to look at retention, trying to look at stability and sustainability to have a long-term relationship with our employees. All of that is the case. And so I know we're short on time, so I'm just going to say what she said. 100%.
If I could add, the other part that I see is, I think stepping into nonprofit, we oftentimes maybe don't even recognize that even nonprofits have a bottom line that no one likes to talk about. So the mission definitely trumps it, but there is that bottom line. And I think one advice for those who are anxious, because I am anxious, right? Like I work for one of the largest nonprofit, and it pays well relatively to other nonprofits in Maine. But as a young person, that is anxiety when you have bills to pay, especially if you start adding the layers of inequities, whether you're a person of color, women, different, realities that folks have. These are true anxieties or something to have forefront. And I think one of the key components, at least what it drives me, is that nonprofits are uniquely positioned to change to kind of move the needle. And it's not just work, and that can only happen when we move also beyond our individual nonprofit. So one of the leveraging point is, if you're working for a nonprofit, you get to collaborate with a lot of others, especially those in the community. And the closer you're able to collaborate and get to the community, I think that's an opportunity to embed whatever you're learning, whatever the mission is, to embed it into existing structures that are not equitable for everyone. So I think it's like moving from this lens of taking the work that you have in every place that you go and being very aware that there is a bottom line, there are inequities in every single organization. Even if you have DEI at the forefront, those inequities are structurally disabling for many of us, and being able to have that at the forefront and make a deeper connection to the work that is happening in the community can sometimes help with kind of provide the blanket of safety and security as you do go through these uncertainty of not knowing if you may have this job or if priorities change, what happens. So being true again to whatever is core to your calling may provide that safety net in ways that you may not otherwise see.
And I just echoing everything that's been said, I think not just for this question, but for previous questions about being nimble and having this skill set that, you can do a lot of different things. And so you may be at a nonprofit that may have to do restructuring, but oftentimes because you've done all of these things already and you've worn a lot of hats in this nonprofit, there's a lot of opportunities for that restructuring to still include you and still kind of create opportunities for growth. And myself, I'm new to Bigelow, but a lot of my coworkers that aren't scientists here have been working in nonprofits for a very long time and have, become art directors, even though they don't have a degree in art. And so I think that's really something to highlight with nonprofits, is that restructuring, as Colleen said, it happens in regular for-profit businesses too. But the difference is that there's sort of this kind of community a network of people that sees your skills and can find a place for you.
I love all those answers, and I think it's great that you kind of dispelled a lot of those, misconceptions or stereotypes. I also want to point out that last week we had a whole webinar on negotiating offers and making decisions, and I just kind of wanted to put out that, like, you should totally ask those questions if you pursue a career in a nonprofit. Ask about the compensation, ask about the pay structure, ask about the life of this position. That only will help you make those decisions. Okay, we have 1 minute left. So I just wanted to kind of thank you all, but is there any last, burning things someone wanted to say before we go? You've all been really great.
I just wish all the folks who are on this call the best of luck, and please connect on LinkedIn. And if you just want to grab coffee, or I don't want to speak for my other panelists, we're all busy people, but if you want to chat or pick my brain a little bit, I'm happy. I'm always happy to do that.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk to folks. I'm putting my email in the chat, but feel free to connect on LinkedIn too.
Same.
And thank you to Maine Career Catalyst for hosting the panel. This was really super fun.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you to all of you, and thank you to Juliet for being behind the scenes there, making things work. Interns in the audience, hope to see you out and about at future MCC events. And one last thank you to all of our panelists.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Take care.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.